Exclusive interview with a man who has one of the country's toughest jobs. The new Homeland Security Secretary, Johnso, tracks every terror and security threat to America 24/7. And our senior justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, went behind the scenes with him to get an inside look at those challenges. Good morning, Pierre.
Good morning, George. It can be an unforgiving job. Johnso is one of the key people the taxpayers pay to worry about all the ugly, dark threats to literally be at the center of every bad storm.
It's 6:28 a.m. and the new Homeland Security Secretary arrives at an agency born out of the 9/11 nightmare, a nightmare Johnso experienced firsthand in an intensely personal way.
I was born September 11th, 1957.
And were you in New York on 9/11?
I was in Manhattan, and I remember looking out the window, and I could see the World Trade Center on fire. And within minutes, I saw the second plane hit.
You actually saw it?
Yes, and I saw the buildings collapse. And like a lot of New Yorkers that day, I went down to the street and literally wandered the streets asking, what can I do?
Nearly 13 years later, Johnso now heads an agency with a key role in preventing terror attacks like 9/11. After reading in the first item on the agenda, a super secret intelligence briefing on all the ways terrorists are trying to kill us.
When you receive that morning briefing on the terror threat, how sobering is that?
You've got to sort out a lot of noise in what we read. A lot of this stuff can be pretty alarming. It can be sobering, without a doubt.
We're in the Secure National Operations Center.
If we had an event, this essentially is my eyes and ears.
I was just noticing you had 2 bomb threats and also a restaurant explosion that you had to check out.
We're looking at everything.
And when he says everything, he really means everything. Tornadoes, hurricanes, oil spills, border security, presidential security, aviation security, and the emerging cyber threat.
The cybersecurity threat is not just a threat, it's a series of ongoing daily attacks.
And of course, there's always the crisis of the moment, like the 15-year-old boy who stowed away in the wheel well of a commercial plane and flew from California to Hawaii.
I am concerned that someone was apparently able to breach airport security and position himself in an aircraft like that. We're taking a hard look at airport security and how it was breached in that particular incident.
And Johnson says the recent disturbing spike in mass shootings has to be addressed now.
This is a growing phenomenon around the country. I was in the Department of Defense during the first Fort Hood shooting in November 2009. And when the second one occurred a couple of weeks ago, I was devastated. It's Army bases, it's Navy installations, it's schools. One of my own people, TSA officer Hernandez, was killed at LAX last fall.
But how do you deal with it on the front side?
I think we need to do more. I want solutions before I leave office.
But make no mistake, the urgent ongoing threat of terror is priority number 1.
A new terror warning for American athletes and fans descending on Sochi, Russia.
Only a few weeks into the job, Homeland Security had to warn the airlines about a toothpaste bomb threat to the Sochi Olympics and intelligence that terrorists were designing shoe bombs and explosives that look like cosmetics. And now there is a specific emerging terror threat that has Johnso deeply concerned.
Syria has become a matter of homeland security, and we're very concerned about Syria foreign fighters, people who are going into Syria, being recruited by extremists there.
Many of these fighters in Syria have trained with hardened al-Qaeda terrorists. The fear is that some travel to Europe, where they could launch attacks or more easily travel to the U.S.
We've been working together on sharing information, tracking these individuals.
Any concern that some of them have been in the U.S.?
We are continually monitoring the situation, and we are concerned, yes.
Last week's drone strikes in Yemen reminded us that al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula remains a lethal threat. That's the al-Qaeda affiliate responsible for the Christmas 2009 plot to use an underwear bomb to blow up a plane over Detroit.
It's still very active. They're still making efforts to attack the homeland.
Today,
they've tried several times in the past, and AQAP is still active, and we have to be vigilant.
And then there's the threat much closer to home.
We also have to be concerned about the lone wolf, the independent actor, and we've seen a lot of that. The Boston Marathon bombing a year ago is a perfect example of that.
While national security threats consume much of his time, Johnson is about to wade into the hot-button issue of immigration.
No paper! No fear!
On Friday, dozens of protesters marched to the Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs headquarters, confronting the agency over deportation.
President Obama has been promising immigration reform, but what he has given the people is actually record numbers of deportations and violations of their civil rights.
In response to critics, last month, President Obama asked Johnson to oversee a review of deportation policy.
The president said he wanted you to come up with a more humane approach to immigration. Yes. What does that mean?
Immigration laws or any other law needs to comport with American values. And one of those American values is respect for human dignity. I also believe one of those American values is respect for the sanctity of the family unit.
But does that mean that people who are here illegally, who have not been committed crimes, have less to worry about?
It means that I am looking for ways to more effectively enforce and administer our immigration laws.
But this week, 22 Republican senators sent the president a blistering letter expressing their grave concerns that changes under consideration would represent a near complete abandonment of basic immigration enforcement.
Some critics on the right saying, hey, you're not enforcing the law.
I don't understand those who say we are not enforcing the law. We are enforcing the law every day. None of what I can do, however, is a substitute for action by Congress. We have an immigration system in this country that is not working. Comprehensive immigration reform would fix it. This is something we need to do. I'm confident that it will happen.
A lot to chew on there, Pierre. I think the most striking thing there is that the crisis in Syria could now pose a direct threat to the United States.
Huge priority, George. They're talking about these al-Qaeda operatives. They're going somewhere, and some are likening it to what happened in Afghanistan years ago. It's a major training ground, and they believe it could spill over to here.